Welcome everyone to episode 36 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts and today I talked with Josh Beattie, who is a pop music producer from the Gold Coast, Queensland. In this episode, we talked about the steps taken to improve efficiency and implementing systems, his unique and somewhat chaotic approach to production, as well as the dangers of comparing yourselves to others. For all that and heaps more, stay tuned. If you could do us a huge favor and make sure you share this podcast online, that is the best way to spread the word and get this out to as many people as possible, as well as making sure you are following or subscribed on the podcast platform that you like to listen to or watch this on. That way you can stay up to date with each new episode featuring all of these amazing producers and engineers from Australia. I hope you enjoy this episode 36 of What's That Sound with Josh Beattie. You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts. Welcome everyone to another episode of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts. Today I'm here with Josh Beattie. Josh, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. Let's kick it off with a little bit of an about you. Tell the people what you do in the music industry and we'll delve into before that. But yeah, just a quick rundown first.
Absolutely. So I'm pretty much just a producer, just one of those guys. Doing pop production is about 90% of my existence in music. And then I also am an occasional MD and keyboardist and bassist for an occasional show. Very, very occasionally I'll help put on a live event as well. And very, very occasionally I'll do like a music video. So I've got a slight film background, but day to day, I'm just in here helping singer-songwriters do cool pop songs, and that's my life.
Yeah, that's sick. Well, take us back to the early days. Where did music come into play, and what was like making you happy back in the day?
Damn. Well, I think I found music unusually early. I think that, I don't know, the first time I saw a piano, I was just like trying to figure out how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb and just kind of figuring out, oh my goodness, there's like some scales you want to skip 2 notes and some you want to skip 1 note, and this is how you play a song. When I was a teenager, I was just in lots of bands with any friends that had a garage and wanted to have a jam. And I actually started like producing unusually early. I think by the time I was like 12 or 13, I had this secondhand laptop with like 2 kilobytes of RAM and a copy of Sony Acid Pro or Cakewalk Music Creator or something like that.
I used to use Acid Pro 6. That was my jam back in the day.
You know Acid Pro, man. I mean, it was
actually sick. Like, it was really good.
Yeah. It didn't have like any convenience tools ready to go. It didn't have like cool piano number 3, Jeff the drummer. Yeah. But it was just like, it was Pro Tools. It was like, record stuff and then record something else over it.
Yeah.
Didn't know what a producer was or what a producer did. I was just really, every kid has their little obsession, and mine was just making sounds. So yeah, I had this, I think a Korg 01W, also secondhand from like 2000s. The golden age of all gear. Wow, isn't it cool that we can make things digital? And we all know it sounds kind of shitty, but we're all just going to do this because digital is the future.
Yeah.
And didn't know what an interface was. I was just using the headphone hole in the laptop and just mucking around.
What music were you listening to?
Whoa, okay, so I'll expose myself a little bit. I was a prog rock teen, right? I was that guy that was listening to I loved the Mars Volta, loved Dream Theater, loved Tool, and I also loved telling everyone else that their music sucked because it wasn't in 7/16.
that checks out. Yeah.
And look at me now. Teenage Josh would be so disappointed.
Can relate. Absolutely. Yep. No, that's awesome. And so, like, when you started doing it yourself, were you working on your own bands? Were you working on other people's tunes? What was going on there?
I think organically it was, I was very lucky because in grade 10, I went to kind of an arts focused high school. It was very experimental. It was a public school, but they were like, hey, let's open this thing called the Queensland Academy for Creative Industries. So you had to audition for music, film, or theater to get in. So it kind of like all of the nerdiest music kids from the other schools would come to this school. So my whole class was songwriters, and that school actually had a recording studio in the top level of it, but they just kind of put it in there to look impressive, but it wasn't part of the course. Like you couldn't learn music production. Yeah, right. And because I was kind of the nerdiest one, I just noticed that it was just always empty. And it was a good room. I think they had like one U87 and one of those big, disgusting digi-design control surfaces. Because like that's the sign of like a studio that wants to look cool is like it kind of looks like an SSL and people just go faders. Oh, studio. But nobody wanted to book it. And I made friends with the teachers and I was like, hey, listen, at lunchtime and after school, can I just go in and like record stuff? And they're like, well, you're not going to break anything. So like off you go, mate.
Yeah. Nice.
So yeah, I was in there just doing a lot of like, didn't know what I was doing, but still liked doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. And that just turned into like, hey, do you want to help me record songs? And I was like, yeah, cool. I've got ideas for drum parts and we know somebody who plays the violin for some reason and we'll just track and track and track. Still didn't know what a producer was, by the way. I was just like, cool, let's record things because I find it interesting. So yeah, I think I was in a folk band called the 40 Thieves, which was an all acoustic, like Mumford & Sons before Mumford & Sons were cool, and then Mumford & Sons became cool, and we were like, oh damn, we don't own this lane anymore. But yeah, I was just like tracking everything and doing my best to make it sound good with like, I had a blue Yeti. A USB microphone back in the day, and that was my one tool. That was my whole studio.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, like anyone knows these days. How long ago is this, by the way?
This would have been. I was 16, and I'm 30 now, so 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Wait, that's.
Yeah.
That was bad
close to that. Yeah. I mean, obviously these days things have gone crazy with, the ability to record things yourself. I mean, with BandLab and stuff that you can do it. I had a kid through the other day. We did a school field trip, and he showed me some of his tunes that he'd recorded through his iPhone mic, and it was sick. Like, it was awesome. But I mean, 15 years ago is a little bit different, but still, I think we were on the precipice of, being able to deliver like decent quality stuff and a blue Yeti mic. Yeah.
15 years ago was a really interesting time to learn music production because we weren't like nowadays. You could say, you could record in your bedroom with a laptop and one mic and lots of third-party plugins and probably fool somebody that you recorded at a big commercial studio. When I was learning, it was like maybe almost the case, but like not quite.
Yeah.
And also it was an interesting time because it was like there was no Pensado's place. There was no like YouTube, like now there's a video on every single topic. Like sidechain compression. We're going to talk for 30 minutes about this. But then it was very intuitive, and I kind of like skipped the whole thing where, like, a lot of producers when they were coming up, they went to school and did a big course about music production and had a studio in there, or they were one of the lucky few to get to like assist one of the greats and be like an assistant engineer, and then they just like made coffees and swept the floor, and then eventually a band came in, someone got sick, and they were like, "Hey kid, you know how to drive this thing?" But for me, it's been very, very linear, and just a case of like, I did this song and I got a bit better and I learned a thing and I met more people, and I did another song and I got a bit better, and people were like, "Hey, maybe you could do this for a job. I've got lots of songs for you." And I also went through a bit of a detour of, because I studied, at one point I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I studied Bachelor of Film and TV. And I kind of like, that's the most formal training I've had as like a post-production sound mixer. I was like holding booms and recording Foley and stuff like that. And I did actually do that kind of work. And I started getting asked to do the soundtracks for all the films too.
Cool.
So it was a bit weird, because when I started in audio as a job, I was pretty much exclusively doing composition for films and sound effects, and then kind of like eventually went, oh, I could do this now that I have this knowledge, but for music. It was kind of an unusual, wiggly path, but
absolutely, yeah. I mean,
here we are.
There's few parallels. There's not like a heap of parallels necessarily with obviously the learning of film, and the only real parallel is the creative aspect to it. But when you're in school and stuff, there's not much of that. It's very rigid, and you're kind of, this is how you do it. All right, okay, now you stand there and you do it. And it was the same. I went to TAFE to study music industry skills, technical production. And it was similar. It was like, we had the studios, we had the microphones, but it was still like, it wasn't like, all right, bring a project in start to finish and there you go. It was very much like, today we're going to learn about EQ and here's how you do it. And it still wasn't like an in-depth thing. It was like, yeah, it was very rigid. It wasn't like creative. So, I mean, fast forward a bit, like when you said you started to get jobs in, like, people were trusting you with taking on projects and stuff. What did that look like? Did you have any mentors, or was it still self-guided? Was it still like you doing it by yourself?
Nah. I almost wish that I every now and then I'm like, oh man, I wish I had a mentor growing up, but I think I've tried to make up for that lack of someone taking me under their wing by throughout my little journey, is just making sure to occasionally collaborate with other really good producers and engineers, and getting together with peers and kind of learning together. And also making an effort to make sure that I wasn't just a hidey hole dungeon producer, but I was working in a range of commercial spaces as well. And just making an effort to be like, okay, well, I'll force myself to do projects with gear that I don't recognize, and I'll force myself to do projects with people who standing next to, I feel like an amateur. And hopefully I'll learn a thing or two from them through that process. But yeah, it's I got to be a producer just because I started doing it and refused to stop. Really.
Yeah. It's funny that we had I had my last guest, Jack Arons. We were literally talking about that. It's like the end is when you stop. And so if someone claims that they were forced to give up or something like that, it's like the enforcing was on yourself. It was us doing it to ourselves if we ever stopped doing something. So it's really interesting. And I guess, did you feel like there was a clear point where you were like, I'm doing it, this is my job now? Or was that very gradual?
There was a time that became the case, but it wasn't an internal thing. It was actually quite arbitrary because I think there was a big push for me when I was still working a day job teaching at a film school, and I was doing kind of audio post-production, sound editing for the content that they made and doing a little bit of teaching. And then I had my little passion projects on the side, my little jobs. And there was a point where, like, because I was casual and budget rules changed for tertiary training places, or stuff happened,
Right.
and they were like, "Listen, your shifts are going to go down." And I was used to that, like a kind of like an inconsistent like fluctuation in work from my day job. But then there was kind of I was in the background going like, okay, look, I need to learn a bit about business, and I need to get my stuff sorted, and I need a space, and to just get really like good enough to be producing like commercially viable, above the threshold of professional work. I need to get there, need to network with musicians, and hopefully I'll be able to transition out of that job. And then one time they were like, "Oh, listen, you're not going to have any work for like 3 months, maybe even 4 or 5." And I was like, okay. So I was at a bit of a crossroads where I was like, okay, this is the closest thing to being a music employee at this job I will be, or do I jump off the cliff and be a freelancer?
Yeah.
And I chose the latter. So like emotionally, philosophically, I can't point to this is when I became a producer on paper, but there was that kind of like external, like, hey, you're going to do it now? Because now's the time. It's a bit earlier than you expected, but like, what else are you going to do?
And so with that, were there like clear things that stuck out to you, like, I'm lacking here, like this is what I really need to focus on right now? Or did you kind of just go for it and let it all just happen?
I think it's more the latter. Like it was kind of a messy process. I think that concept of like reflecting and going like, what do I need to get better at to do this with my life, for me is kind of like a constant iterative process. Like there's like, I can think of a laundry list now of things that I feel like I need to kind of really knuckle down on. But funnily enough, and I think a lot of producers might be able to relate, but sometimes it's actually not it's not your mixes that need to get better, and it's not your like more plugins you need to buy. It's actually kind of just getting efficient and getting a little bit good at business. You don't have to be like a top G hustler, but you need to get it. You need to get the economics of what you're doing enough that you can kind of make a living and turn around enough work and have a system where you look for musicians that you might like to work with as well. So it's like that unsexy stuff that actually tends to unlock a lot of time to do the thing that you like doing, which is probably making music.
Well, yeah, and I think part of the reason for that with when we're producing and mixing and recording and stuff is we're always doing our best, and we can only do what we can do at that time anyway. There's no way to speed up that process or bypass anything that we aren't aware of, because we just do our best. And so each time that we do a mix or a production, it probably is going to get a little bit better incrementally each time. But talk us through that, that process of like implementing a system, because I know that there's specific things that I've done to clean up my process and make sure that I'm not leaving things, boxes unchecked. So talk us through how you kind of navigated that systematic setup.
Well, I think I would be lying if I said that I was great at systems in my business. Like the thing about me is I don't, and I'm sure you're probably the same, and most people listening are the same, but I don't make music so that I can run a business. I just run a business so that I can make music. So
Mm,
it's kind of like you have to in and amongst your learning about like getting better as a producer, whatever that means to you.
mm,
In the foreground of that is also like, how long you have to start measuring things like how long does it
mm,
actually take me on average to do this task and that task? How long does it take me to do whatever pre-production I need to do to feel confident about doing a job?
mhm,
How much time do I spend interacting with the artist about the total job? And like, what is my revisions process? And I think
mm.
before we start freelancing, we don't actually have to think about that because, you know, most of us, like, when we're really young, we're just like, okay, cool. Like, we're in a band with my mate Paul, and we've been working on a single for like 12
Mm.
months. And, you
Yeah.
know,
There's also not enough data. There's no, like, you can't reflect on stuff that you haven't done. So only after working on minimum of like 10 tracks, and each track's different as well. So it's like, I think all of those different data points, then you can start to reflect on stuff.
oh, yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. It's like that what gets measured gets managed. And if
Mm,
you haven't done, yeah, sometimes sheer volume is the thing that kind of opens your eyes and goes
mm,
like, okay, like what do I, and you might not even find that you have to change anything to turn your hobby production into a job.
mm.
But you might just find that you have to be a little bit more conscious about how you schedule your time,
Yep.
what work life balance means to you, because it means a different thing to everybody.
Mm,
Um, all those little things that you have to do in any freelance or small business position, even outside of music.
mhm.
Um, yeah. And so, yeah, you
Yeah,
just
I
kind of,
mean,
yeah.
it's true, and like the little things, like you were saying, you know, like how much pre-prod do I need to do, and then it's something like that'll change your life, like setting up a template for some people, or you know, like knowing that okay, I need to always have that microphone set up that way, or you know, have this here and have that there, so that it makes things more streamlined. They're the little things that really change the game for speed and efficiency. And like you said, it's not necessarily like these big business things that are gonna like
Yeah.
change everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also funny because, there is often a general sense that business and music seem to be antithetical to each other because I
Mm,
think a lot of us come from, especially in probably our age group, where we come from being like one of those punk ass teens that's just like,
mm.
I don't care about my job. I don't care about money. I just want to play the guitar for the rest of my life. And I don't want to sell out. Like, remember when we used to criticize bands
Yeah,
for
yeah,
selling out? So,
big time.
like, yeah, and also we probably have the narrative of like the journey of a musician is to just struggle, and then maybe make it big. When the reality, at least for me, has been like, no, like you can, it's a bit more incremental than that, and you don't like we just said, like you don't have to want to set up an empire or be like a studio owner, but I think it is worth thinking about the economics of your production, thinking about money early, because you're never going to log on to Seek and find, hey, we need a music producer full
Yeah.
time starting on Monday. That just won't
Great
exist.
point.
Like even if
Great
you
point.
do work in a commercial studio, those the big Australian commercial studios are basically co-working spaces now. It's just like you're still running a business just in a room in the commercial studio.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think like one thing on the point that you made earlier about like, you know, where how we saw things growing up. For me, it was like watching DVDs of bands, and it was like you only saw the highlights reel. Like, and I think what was interesting for me was always the behind the scenes stuff, the backstage stuff, like what they did on their off time and things like that. But we didn't see necessarily heaps of the struggles or the actual business. We never saw the business side of things. We only saw the performances. And I think honestly these days I hear a lot of the narrative of social media. You only see the good. And actually, I think it's the opposite. You actually have access to so much more of the behind the scenes business side of things. If you want to look at it, look out for it. If you want to look into all of that stuff is actually way more available now than it was 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah. I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about, having access to that behind the scenes on different social media platforms. Like there are artists that will do, I love the Adam Neely's channel, for example, and he's done a couple of videos which are just vlogs breaking down how he made a tour work. And it wasn't just like a cool millennial highlight reel with lots of transitions and crowds playing. It was just like, this is how the logistics worked and how many people got in a van and which show we played and how, and he showed like the unflattering sides of being a musician as well, like the shit stuff, which is, I think, on one hand, artists aren't the mysterious magazine celebrities they once were, and perhaps that mystery was a cool thing. But I like the candor and the honesty that we get to experience of like, hey, music is like such a beautiful, primal, ethereal thing, but the job side of it is not for the faint of heart, and you have to go through that to make the fun stuff work. And I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there are so many people that are super interested in the unsexy side of business and music, and they would have existed back then, but it would have been so much harder to actually get an education in that because of, all of it's on the job and all of it's learning as you go. Yes, there are business courses and stuff like that, but not so specifically related to the ins and outs of a tour, for example, like you mentioned, or running a studio or something like that. And so many people I know are way more interested in that than the artistic side of it or even the production side of it. So yeah, it's great to be able to have access to that sort of stuff now. Yeah, way more than we ever did, which is great. Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it. All right, so I want to unpack, some of the process-based stuff, like the way that you go about doing things these days. Obviously you've been doing it for quite a while now. Have things changed since when you first started, or is it more of just like an evolution of the past?
Like the process of actually like working in the studio with people?
In a session, working with artists, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I don't have a process. I don't even really do pre-production, to be honest. I find it kind of a bit boring. The most pre-production I will do, for example, is I will basically talk to the artist for like anywhere between half an hour to 2 hours before we even like turn the computer on.
Cool.
And in that session, I'm not making tempo maps. I'm not writing charts. I'm not even making notes about what is going to happen. We're just sharing music and kind of talking about what we've been up to in life. And I'm just trying to work out what the artist's idea of good music is, and and I'm also trying to work out like any pet hates they have, like if they think trap hi-hats are really cringe, or they just like I need to know that kind of stuff, so that I don't want to have like it's like having a compass rather than having a map. Because if you have a map, you kind of know exactly where you're going to go and all the distances. But I prefer to just have a compass, which is just like, let's go vaguely towards this idea of what you think your vision is. But when I start a project with an artist, I don't want to know what the finished song is going to sound like when I start it. I want to discover it along the way, which is for some people too anxiety inducing, a bit too chaotic, but that's kind of how I do the best results. And so we will go in and just start.
Yeah.
and
was
there's
there
no
something
there's,
that like pointed you to that way? Was there an experience that you had where you said, I'm going to do it this way from now on? Or have you always done it like that?
I think my brain has always just been a bit all over the place, and I will just reach for what I find exciting and what the artist finds exciting. So there's no such thing as like, the traditional thinking of like, let's track drums. Now let's track bass and let's work our way up and do vocals at the end. It kind of looks more like, the closest thing I do have to a process, I would say, is like an artist comes in, we get like some shitty ass piano and enough drums to indicate what the energy level of the song might be.
Cool.
And then we get to recording vocals as fast as we possibly can. And it's a strange way to work, but I've even like modified that kind of process. So these days I'll actually track all the leads and any ad libs, harmonies, any singing I would like them to do. And I'll even process, mix, and melodyne and tune them first.
Wow.
And then sometimes I'll take just vocals and then delete every instrument I've made and then start from basically an a cappella and produce around that vocal. I think that comes from the style I work in, which is pop music, which is I'm kind of finding that if your vocals sound amazing, then you can't fuck it up. You can't fuck it. If your vocals sound amazing and you bring in like a couple of drums and your bass, like that's a song, and everything else is just like detail and decoration and extra feelings.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that I have taken from that. And one is what you just mentioned, where potentially you're not overproducing a song. You're just giving it what it needs. And the focus in pop music is the vocal. And so like you said, like when that's there and that's all ready to go, you can just give the song what it needs and serve those vocals. And I love that. But, listening to some of your catalog, it's custom is a word that sticks out to me. Every song has a unique identity. All the drum sounds are like vastly different. Some of them are like hard hitting rock drums almost, and some of them are more trappy sort of stuff. And each song's identity is clear. And that is something that I've always been attracted to musically, is even if a band I love has a sound, it's like they take the time to foster what that song needs. And I love that. So can you kind of speak on that a little bit more maybe?
Well, firstly, thank you for the kind words. Thanks for noticing my little drums. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
I think that comes from, I don't know, if I had to illustrate how I work as a producer, is occasionally people have asked, okay, so one thing that I can't do is like just make an instrumental and then give it to somebody to top line. To me, in my brain, I can't comprehend, because I don't know what to do unless if I don't know what the song is about, and if I don't know how people are supposed to listen to it, then you've just got a million options, and I'm not going to make a cool thing. Especially, I disappoint hip hop people a lot, because they're like, "Oh, dude, I love to work with you. Can you send me your beats?" And I'm like, I don't have any. Like, what do you mean? You're a producer? Like, yeah, no, you tell me, like, let's learn about your thing, and then I can make your beat. And I think that idea of customizing a sound has to do with, well, it has to do, first of all, with my personal temperament of getting really itchy and not wanting to do the same thing twice. Like the only style I refuse to do is the thing that I just did. And I guess the second thing is also, like, especially when you are working with indie, emerging, growing artists, and the intention is to kind of like get their music out there and reach an audience, it's really, really helpful for them to have some kind of sonic signature, which by default will happen because of their vocals, hopefully. But you know, you want that sensation of pressing play and then 2 seconds in, just being like, oh, this is a Gabriel Paris song or something like that.
Yep.
So I'm kind of like, if I feel that something is, for lack of a better word, generic or something that I've heard before, it's I don't know, it's kind of a bummer to me. It's like, it's not done unless it's unique and original. And that's probably also part of the reason why I'm quite averse to too much pre-production or even using reference tracks. Like we might use a reference track at the start and I'll be like, well, thanks for showing me this. Now I kind of understand what you like, but we're not going to do that. If you like Katy Perry, we're not going to mimic. Yeah, we're not going to mimic Katy Perry, because if you love Katy Perry and you make a song that sounds exactly like her, you're not going to do as good a job, because she's been doing it for like 10. She's been Katy Perry your whole life. You're not going to out Katy Perry in one day. So just be you, man. Just be yourself. That's what I'm really trying to say. It's just like, be yourself, man. Row your own canoe.
Now, you mentioned the song that you don't want to do is the one that you just did. Does that mean that you don't really have like a favorite style or element to work on? Is that accurate to say then?
Extremely accurate. I don't have, you mentioned templates. It would be like a really good idea for me to have production templates, but I don't. I start from a blank Pro Tools project every single time, because I don't want to. If I make a sound for one artist and one song, emotionally, I kind of feel like it belongs to them. So for a different person, I have to think of what their sound is. I'm perhaps a little over obsessive about that idea, but like, it comes from wanting to serve the artist, but it also comes from wanting to I just get excited by novelty and stuff that I haven't done before.
That's great. And I think, like, again, it will just lead you to be more creative and follow things that are exciting, which is always some of the most fun things to do in a recording. Is like, what's that sound? How can we showcase that? How can we give that its time in the light? And,
I can't believe you just dropped the name of the podcast into a sentence. You just said, "What's that sound?"
I didn't even notice that. I'll put some money in the swear jar then. That's my bad.
Sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
No, I was, but what I was going to lead into is like, can you kind of pinpoint times that you've been in the studio and you've gone, that was great. Like there was something about that production session or songwriting session or whatever it might look like. Was there any times where you're like, that's what I love?
Do you know what? I think those times are all like, I have like huge respect for producers that have a vision or understand an artist's vision and they execute exactly that and they just get it perfect. I love people that can do that, but that's not me, because sometimes like my favorite moments in the studio is when sounds happen that that are out of your control, and it wasn't like your plan or your idea. It was just like randomness that happened that just excited you. Like, I think there is, I'll give you an example. I worked on a really cool track with an artist called Sophia Zeller, and she just has such a cool ear for weirdness in a good way. And so when we were doing, I think in our session, we were writing on the spot and I was just kind of producing on the spot. It was one of those from scratch sessions.
Yep.
And I remember just going like, because we hadn't worked together, so you kind of like, you know, you're always a little conservative creatively in the first session. And I'm just like, oh, how about this? How about this? And at one point she just said, that's cool, but it sounds too normal. I was like, what? And it was just like a little altar boy pitch shift. She was just like, no, I've heard that in other songs. I was like, wow, you're that spicy? All right, let's go all the way. And it was...
This is going to be fun. And
everything was just so crunchy and random. And we ended up with a song that had, I think it does have a chorus, but verse 2 is just like a different thing. And there's a random section and it has an intro and an outro. It's wild. But some of those sounds I think came from, I think it was like a plug-in synth left open that was accidentally recording into a blank track, not through a preamp, but just through the routing in Pro Tools, which was creating this like feedback tone. Yeah. And she was like, that's the coolest thing. Can you put it in the song? I was like, are you sure? If another producer hears this, they're going to think I'm a bad producer. She's like, I don't care. I was like, well, I don't care either. Let's put it in. And it's like one of the main bits, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's just so beautiful about music is that, like, yes, it comes from, like, you can study music and you can be a visionary and have a clear vision, but this other mysterious factor of accidents and coincidences and being able to capture them is like just the coolest thing. It's so dope.
Yep. And I always talk about that. I think a lot of that comes from collaboration, because we can only do what we can refer to. We can only we can't completely invent something from scratch, because even when we're doing that, we're already kind of relating it to something that we've heard before, or it's a synth patch that already exists or something like that. Whereas someone that has different life experience to you, listens to completely different music to you, all that sort of stuff, when you work with them, you bounce off them, they say something that you were completely not expecting them to say, like you just said, like use that, like you wouldn't have used that tone from the MacBook feedback. Like you just wouldn't have done that. And so when someone says, do that, you're like, cool. Like I would have never, And that's collaboration to me.
Yeah. And it also keeps the momentum going. Like I don't want to, like I'd like to think that I've worked on a wide amount of music and I'm a pretty well-rounded producer, and I even know my way around theory pretty good and arrangement, but I never want to have that feeling of somebody going like, hey, here's my song, would you like to work on it? Oh, yes, I'd love to, here it is. I don't want to be like, I know exactly what to do and write a list and record those things and get it mixed. I want to be surprised, and I don't want to feel like I have all the answers. I want like shit to screw up, and I want someone else to be like, what about this thing that you would never do? And it's just like, oh shit. Like that's how you get more stuff in your brain. I don't know.
I think it's what sets you apart as well. It's like, that's why people like to work with you, or they resonate with the music that you create. It's because you've done something unexpected. And I think, like you said, you can't imitate someone because they're them and you're you. It's just always going to sound like a watered down version of them. And I think those are the big reasons why you might create a name for yourself. But I love that, man. That's great. You know, we've talked about, you know, some of the more exciting things that we've gone through. Tell us about some of maybe the less desirable things that you've had to go through, and how you've navigated maybe some either ambiguity or difficulties or things like that.
Do you know what? I almost feel like this is still relevant to what we were just talking about, which is like, I think if you were to like, if I were to reflect back and think about my worst work, if I were to think about the songs that I'm just like, that's kind of cringe, it didn't stand the test of time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was when I was in a phase of basically trying to produce like everybody else. Like, I don't know if you had much of this experience, but like the mid 2010s, like 2020, mid 2010s was a real weird time for music production because the default genre, the default style of pop was like future bass and still some big room EDM. And it was kind of like this time of producer flexes where you'd write your song and then there'd be a pre-chorus and then there'd be like the loudest drop you could possibly conjure up with your software. And we're talking like 16 hypersaws all stacked, every frequency, a sub, and then multiing out the bass 3 times, and then every synth ducked to your kick drum. So you basically like, you were trying to like make the loudest white noise splash you were possibly doing. Yeah. And I kind of enjoy that pop music has relaxed a little bit on that. Like we're exploring disco and funk, and we're going like less production value, more intimate, more candid. But yeah, going back to your question, like it's funny, like the worst songs I've ever done were the songs where I had a story in my head that like, to do a good job of this, it needs to be so fat and there needs to be so many fills. Or the opposite, like where I've recorded acoustic artists and going like, oh, just serve this song, just strip it down like acoustic and vocals, and that's going to be a bit of reverb, and like don't, I think that's, you have a bit of a rite of passage. You have a journey to go through when you are learning to produce, where at the start you just need to cut your teeth. So you're just saying yes to everything and just trying to make people happy and work hard. And then you start going, okay, so who else is around me? Like, what kind of work are they doing? I've got to like step up. And sometimes that idea of stepping up is like, well, I've got to produce this way and it's got to sound like this. And I'm not going to let my weird ideas out because like that's not cool, or that's not going to get played on the radio. And then you finally might kind of venture outside and go, hang on, it's actually okay. Like the things that make me the musician that I am and not Stu or somebody else, they're actually valid and they're cool. And there will be enough artists out there that will resonate with my little voice, and it'll work really well. And so I think once I started to, I don't know, like not censor myself and just go, hey, this is like how I hear music. And this is, I don't know if I have a production sound, but I certainly like all music to have a lot of flavor and to have a sense of fun about it, even if it's a really serious ballad, just like, I don't know. And when I started to go, hey, this is how I hear music and I'm not going to hide it, I think that 2 things happened. Like my work got better and more people responded in like the music scene to it. So I'm almost at the point now where people who want to do a session with me already kind of know what to expect. Like they're already willing to go on a bit of a spicy adventure and and do something a little unusual, but still like catchy. So
and I mean, it speaks to, again, your personality and the passion. I think we do our best work when we're super passionate. That's pretty obvious, but it can't really be understated either, because you have to just go towards what makes you feel good. And we're in the business of creating something that we hope people will resonate with. And the best way that we can do that is to be ourselves and go towards the things that make us happy. And like you said, you can't worry that people aren't going to, because then you do start to push towards putting yourself in a box and creating the stuff that you think people will like. It's like, it's a weird irony. It's like a contradiction.
Yes. I think that's true of producers, but it's also true of artists or anyone creative.
Yeah.
I think when you are like, I had this, I had a film teacher in high school called Mr. Crozzer, and he was just doing a class on making films, and he dropped this wisdom bomb on me, right? He said, when I make a film, I either want people to hate it and find it disgusting, or I want them to love it. If they think it's just fine, I've failed. And I was like,
yeah.
oh, 15-year-old me was like, that's spicy information. Because I notice it more and more. Like if you play it safe, or you try to fit into a trend, or you do what you think professional music sounds like compared to your contemporaries, the listeners can kind of smell it. It's like they smell the inauthenticity, and they almost smell your insecurity, and they won't know why they don't like the piece of music, but they'll know that they don't like it. They'll just be like, don't feel it. So you true. Kind of, if you really want to do quote unquote good job at music, you have to do the authentic job. You have to do the thing you're excited about. You almost have no choice because Yeah,
I love that. I love that point. You almost have no choice. And I want to relate it back to what you were saying before about the self-consciousness thing and the self-doubt and stuff. For anyone that is currently feeling that, have enough faith in yourself to go towards the things that make you happy, because you're right. You should have no choice but to do the stuff that that makes you feel good. Like if you're going the other way, that can only lead to unhappiness. Honestly, that's, I guess, as simple as I can put it.
Yeah, and I don't mean to like get too deep for a Tuesday morning, but I mean, how many songs are you going to produce before you die?
Yeah.
Like it's probably going to be a few hundred, if maybe a few thousand, but it's not going to be infinity. And so if you have this kind of life's work, which is going to be your lasting impact on the world, wouldn't you want at least most of it to be stuff you genuinely love?
Yeah.
And I understand that is a bit of a privileged perspective, because I can now and probably just most recently be a little bit, I have enough of notoriety that I can be a little bit choosy about what projects I work on. So if I know that I can't help a person make their song really good, and if I don't think I'm the right person, it's no skin off my back to be like, hey, Jared down the road, he's going to smash this. You do with that. So I don't have to say yes to everything. And that is a bit of a secret weapon, because if you know that, I don't know, you have to be excited about what you're working on. You will never ever do. You can do it. Your mix might sound fat. Your snare might be appropriate. Your it might be wide. You might be very encouraging from the process, but you will deny yourself that special X factor that can only come from, like, it's the same principle as, like, you know, like your nonna's cooking, you can taste the love in it. It's like production is a lot like that.
Yep.
And we've all heard songs where we've gone like, there was no passion in that song. Everything was engineered correctly, and the sonics are great, but there's something's missing that I can't put my finger on.
Yeah, and you really need to listen to that inner voice, and when it's telling you something, when like if that's shouting at you and saying something's not right here, listen to it, and at the very least, bring it up. you know, you don't have to go straight to I'm not the right person, but if something's telling you that something's not right, you need to discuss that with the person that you're working with so that you can figure out what the next step looks like. And that might be, I'm not the right person, but it might also be, that person might be like, yeah, I agree. Let's fucking change it up completely.
Yes.
So,
and then, so you're leading to another really important part of all this, which is the relationship that you actually have between the producer and artist in our world. Because the stronger the relationship between the artist and producer is, the less you have to risk when you want to take a gamble on an idea, or if you want to fight for something. Because like you can, there's always a default way to phone something in and be like, oh, nice to meet you. And you're still at the point where you're like signing off your emails with warm regards. I'll see you at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. And then they go, oh yeah, this is my vision. And you go like, la, 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 la. And they might sign off on a production, but you know, you might have that, like, the muse might hit you. And if you know that you both care about the song and that you care about each other, then you can sometimes afford to be like, hey, I know we've spent 3 days on this, but like, can we try this thing just to hear it? And if you hate it, we'll go back to version whatever. Yep. I do that a lot. And to the extent that I've occasionally, like, we'll record a song and then I'll kind of like, something happens and then I'll reproduce the song in a completely different way. Like it's in a different key or a tempo or a different style, or I'll gut the things out and replace them with something else. Yep. And then I'll just go, listen, I'm taking a risk here because you might think that I've just fucked up your song. But like, what if there's something in here that you like? Or even when you're in the studio, I often say, listen, this isn't going in the mix, but do you mind if I tickle my ears because they want to hear something? And sometimes they go, okay, let's stop wasting time. I'm glad I'm not paying you hourly. But sometimes they might go, whoa, I didn't think of it that way. That's like the new main bit of the song. Like that's its new little voice that we didn't know. And so you can go down more rabbit holes creatively if you really like, that starts with a good working relationship. Yeah, 100%. Where there's a lot of trust. Absolutely. Yeah. I can't even add anything to that because I agree exactly with what you've just said. Now, we're running out of time. So one of the things that I love to do to kind of wrap this up and come full circle in the conversation is just get the kind of first main bit of advice that comes to your head for, first of all, producers, engineers, recording artists, whatever. And then secondly, for the artists themselves. Put you on the spot. Okay. I think that my advice for producers and artists in this situation is I'm going to give them the same advice. That's going to apply to both. And that is, you don't have to do what everyone else is doing. You don't have to do what everyone else is doing. So what does that mean? If you're a producer and you probably have a bit of a stalk and you like to be current and aware about what's going on in the industry, and I'm guilty of this sometimes where I go like, oh my God, like this song just sounds so good and my stuff doesn't sound like that. It isn't supposed to. It isn't supposed to. Like, and it goes for like big life and career stuff, but it also goes down to little details. Like just because that producer has an LA2A doesn't mean that you're worse because you don't have one. Just because that producer's like really good at this element of sound design doesn't mean that you have to be. Like, you'll never learn everything And that's kind of a good thing because it allows us all to specialize. Like, we're all producers, but like we're not. We're only united in the sense that all of us are like producers. What does that even mean? That a producer helps an artist make a song really good. That's the only definition of a producer I can think of, because the actual process of doing it looks so varied. Like, you know, some producers don't touch gear. They're like sitting on a couch and they're hiring a big team, and their job is to just make an environment where the team is flourishing. Some producers are just like hands on everything. Some producers never leave Ableton, and they make beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I wish I had some of that advice because my younger self had a lot of, I would kind of beat myself up for like not being able to like mic up a drum kit so good. And it's just like, dude, chill out. You don't have to do, like, you've done, you've mic'd up 2 drum kits in your life. People don't want drum kits from you, like, you know, and you can always work for somebody that can do that thing. And it goes for career stuff as well. Like, just because, and sorry to waffle on this last question, but it also goes for, in the pop world, the music production culture in pop music is a little bit, it tends to be not marriages. It tends to be one night stands. It tends to be like every artist and every top liner and every producer wants to do eventually a session with, like, one session with everybody. Yep. And then some people might be like really cool because they just got signed, or they had a release, or they produced something really good, and everyone goes, oh man, I have to do a session with that person. I got to get in with that. You don't. You don't have to do a session with everybody. You just don't. And the artist side, because they've got to like grow their audiences, build communities, make content and stuff like that. If you hold yourself to the expectation that, oh my goodness, they're doing that and they got some success, so I have to do that. I have to make 10 TikToks a day, and I have to support Vera Blue, and I have to, I don't know, I need to get a publishing deal and talk to this person, and I need to like make posters every day. Like you don't. You only have to do the things that will serve you and the things that you do well and the things you're passionate about, and just relax a little bit.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Josh. That's a great way to finish up. And appreciate you jumping on the podcast. This has been an awesome chat. Where can people find you?
They can go to my Instagram. They can go to my website, but they can find my website through my Instagram. So just go there. I'm wearing this hat and I'm very purple.
And I'll have the links in the show notes anyway.
If you want to talk to me about something serious, send me an email. If you just want to send me a meme, send me a DM.
Love it. Well, thanks again, man. And thank you to everyone for checking this podcast out. It really means a lot. If you want to go the extra mile, you can share it on your socials and spread the word. We want to get it out to as many people as possible. And make sure you hit follow or subscribe so you can stay up to date with each new episode. We're continuously having some amazing guests such as Josh here today. So stay tuned and we will see you next time.
I'm actually going to second that. Please like and subscribe. Stu is doing a great thing with this podcast. I'm really glad it exists, and let's encourage him to keep making more episodes because this is really awesome.
Thanks, Josh. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to What's That Sound? Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.